Hello, and welcome to Night Clerk Radio, episode 111, where we are doing our August new music, which, I don't know, I'm sort of jokingly calling Melted Summer Jams, Ross, because I was thinking about the progression of album choices from June to now, where in June it was like future funk, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, summer's coming, put on the dance music, etc. Kind of the same with July, but not as strong. And then it was just like, I don't know about in Springfield or wherever our listeners live, but here on the East Coast, it was like 4 weeks of like heat index over 100. And I was just kind of done with it.
Oh, yeah.
And then for our August new music, we both picked like darkish ambient.
Yeah.
So like the summer jams are gone.
Certainly.
They're no more.
Yeah, we have been worn down by the heat and humidity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a hot, swampy season.
It's been a gross summer. It's just, I don't know. The thrilling weather conversation, which would be okay if we were talking about weather soft, I suppose.
Yeah.
Or climate wave.
Well, or my album is very hot and swampy.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Mine is not, but it's how the heat makes me feel. So I guess it balances out. I don't know. You got any news? You want to just do albums? I don't know. Like we don't have an intro.
We don't have much.
That was my whole thought, was that like our summer jams have vanished. I had no desire to pick anything that makes you move.
Like
or
both
sweat.
of these albums are sort of like things we haven't covered exactly before because some of the tags. Certainly, my album is not something we've really. I think we mentioned the concept of it before, which is Dino Synth, but like we haven't really done a Dino Synth album before. And I know for your album, there's some tags on there that I have not seen before. So I've really explored. So, there's still weird new ground to explore in haunted music.
That is exciting. All right, well, let's get into some haunted summer music then, if we had nothing else to talk about.
Yeah.
I always talk about music. And that was a bit from track 4 off our first album, which is part 3 of the After series, which is off Hushtones, a dark ambient, dark beats focused sister label of Geometric Lullaby. The actual album title translates to something like After Lighting the Third Candle. And that's the consistent naming structure for all of these. After lighting the first candle, after lighting the second candle. Again, from the artist After, who only has this series on their Bandcamp. So I'm going to guess it's like a side project of somebody in some capacity.
Probably.
Or, they set up a Bandcamp page just for the project itself.
Yeah.
And, the first sample I picked is more dark ambient-y, which is broadly the feel of the album, although there's little tracks that deviate, little moments here and there that are interesting and we'll talk about. But I do want to talk about tags. I'm going to start off with a tag discussion because you were mentioning that during the intros, that this is tagged as Barber Ambient, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I've not heard of this tag. Like, Barber Beats as a genre comes from Haircuts for Men, and it sort of takes this like light resampling, remixing of hip hop and lounge jazz and that kind of thing. And so, like Barber Ambient, like what is this? What's the deal with Barber Ambient? Yeah,
so I assume that we're subsuming Barber as like a plunderphonics, or like a sampling based,
okay,
like prefix now, but it didn't feel Barber Beaty in the same way, unless like what we're Barber Beatsing is themselves dark ambient tracks. I'm just not familiar with them enough to know the samples anymore, compared to like, oh, I know you're just taking this R&B song from the early 90s and redoing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if this album was put on YouTube and run through the, content ID system.
Yeah, but if it's content IDing a bunch of dark ambient, YouTube might not know anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. How would you know?
That's our sample source. Oh, yeah.
Here, actually, it was put on.
Yeah, there's a version on YouTube. Yeah.
See if it's content ID pulled up anything. Nope. So, yeah.
Well, that's the rule here. If YouTube can't find it, 100% original content.
Yeah. Well, we aren't going to be able to find it if YouTube can't.
Well, that's not true, but no, and I've always said I'm not super interested in sample snooping anymore these days, unless something is like 90% there and it's like just on the tip of my tongue. I'll go do some investigation, but in general, I just let it exist. Yeah. I was wondering if you would know what it was based off of, because, for example, the album art for this references Berserk.
Yes,
the famous anime/manga, and I didn't know if you would. Knew what I was like, I'm not that familiar with the Berserk soundtrack outside of the popular ones.
I mean, there were multiple versions of the anime through the
that's true.
One in the 90s and one in the 2010s. I know the imagery and the stylistic thing, like the artist bio pick for after the artist who did all 3 albums is Griffith from it. Like the imagery is like, takes images from the manga and for the album art. So, and thematically, it would make sense. It's at this one of the key moments in Berserk is when Griffith betrays the mercenary company that we've been following. Guts, he's the character, and sacrifices them all to demons to gain power. And Guts somehow survives, but like it's all at that pivotal moment. So it's a very dark moment, supernatural moment in the series, and all of these albums are focused on that key moment in the series. Probably one of the key moments in manga and anime history because it's such an influential series. And like that moment was such a shocking revelation when it first happened. And
yeah, that's right. God, I haven't watched Berserk since high school, probably. But yeah, I remember.
It's driven the entire story since then. And Berserk went on for a long time. So I could see it thematically as that. Like if you had told me this was a hypnagogic vaporwave album, I would almost believe it.
Yeah. It's got some tracks that are definitely more dark ambient, though. Like, I think that dark ambient tag and glitch ambient both make sense as well.
Yeah, the glitch ambient is also real interesting as a tag. That's not something I really explored a lot of. There seems, let's see, like Barber ambient only has like these 3 albums and like 2 others. But glitch ambient, there's quite a few albums under that tag on Bandcamp. So there's more of a, it's more actively recognized as, more artists are working in that space. And that's something that maybe we should explore in future episodes, actually, because I like that contrast between the lush soundscapes. It's got that comfort anxiety dichotomy, right? Like, here's some nice synth pads. It's, like the oceans at night. And then here's some harsh digital noise to ramp up the anxiety. To create some tension here and sort of bleeds into a bit, like I think one of the tags was broken transmissions, but, signal wave vibe. So I find that really interesting as well.
Yeah. Also, to not to harp on tags too much, so we can talk about the music. It is interesting that, the 3 in this series have been released twice. So of the 7 albums that are tagged as Barber Ambient, 6 of them are the 2 versions of the Lighting the Candle quadrilogy. It's supposed to be 4 parts eventually. Then the other one is from Tef, who I know, this Megastructure album. So I'm wondering if this is like after is a Tef side project.
Yeah, I think tags in general are useful to look at because it's how the artist is describing their own work.
Yeah, of course.
So, and all genres are marketing to a degree. So,
but I'm going to look and see if I'm doing snooping.
But this is very much a haunted album, right? Like this is an album about trying to get some rest and not. Like there's these gentle soundscape elements, but then like something comes in and not being able to let go and not being able to find rest.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just hung up on who's behind this. So the way I heard about this album is that it was being promoted by Brick Mason, who we've featured on the show before. So I'm not sure if
this is like a side project of Brick.
He's connected in some way other than promo, and it's related to Geometric Lullaby, so it could be anybody in that stable. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's an awesome dark. I think the way you described it is like a dark ambient / vaporwave album is the best way, because like the first sample I played was more of ambient soundtracks. That track 4, Place of Death, little horns and other effects coming out, but then there's other tracks. Like I'll play a sample of track 2, Walked. And this track is sort of what I expected most of the album to be like, which is this mix of dark ambient and vaporwave. So there's that soundscape, but there's all these little bits of synth and guitar. There's vocals, like vocal processing work into what you think of in vaporwave. Buried way down under in the mix are drums. I think it was described as best experienced in a headphones. And I think that's true because there's a lot of stuff buried in the mix that you may miss on like car speakers or something. Mm-hmm. Especially because there's like this like skittering, skipping kind of layer on top of everything. So I think that's like the best track to describe your vaporwave and dark ambient combination.
Yeah. And again, this is like an extremely haunted album. Like there's so many like ghostly vocals, like and echoing. Echoing's a big theme in this album. Like the echoing vocals, which I found real interesting. And again, which again harkens to the Time of Sacrifice in Berserk. It's very thematically linked, which I like. And yeah, there's some real interesting like lo-fi beats like in track 3 and that kind of like tense drumming. And I quite like that. But yeah, there's elements it's only in the second half of the album, I think, really that the glitchiness really comes into effect. Especially for me, like it was really like the last track, it's very prominent and done to great effect. The radio static. It almost sounds like whale song for a bit in the last track.
Yeah. So the back half of the album, the last 3 tracks of 6 are all Place of Death, Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3, the track titles. So it is this big 3-part thing. And yeah, I thought it was really interesting. So some other moments of those that stood out to me, add on to what you're saying, is the start of track 5, Place of Death, Part 2, has this like heavily reverb delayed guitar. It's just for maybe 30 seconds or so, but it really stood out to me because it was like a little nostalgic burst of, it made me think of like this phase of late 90s, early aughts Buckethead, which is completely musically unrelated to this album. Mm-hmm. But he had a few albums that broke away from like the metal shredding music he was doing, where it was Colma was one of them. And there's a famous song of that called Whitewash, or no, Big Sur Moon. It's a short track and it's fast, but it's like this like heavily bouncing off the delay and reverb. It kind of plays guitar, and it kind of reminded me of that like soothing era. Electric Tears was another album from that era. Yeah, that was less shred focused. I don't know. It's musically unrelated, like I said, but it's one of those little nostalgic bursts of like, oh, I hadn't thought about these albums in a while, and it's like this weird light little connection that my brain made. But kind of the rest of the track, that guitar fades away and it becomes more like choral or ambient. And then the last track, which is, this very long 13-minute track that really has a lot of room to do stuff, it's just Place of Death Part 3, is interesting because like the first couple minutes are a little industrial and there's like maybe like chatter, like a waiting room way buried down under there against all these like pianos and voices and keys. And then at the 7-minute mark is where the album gets the glitchiest it is across the whole album. So there's like
extremely glitchy,
extremely staticky. But then into like this brighter, soothing synth and like a little more clear instrumentation, like a lot of that static fades.
Yeah.
So that sort of nice outro of like, oh, I don't know, like I died or whatever. If you want to go like the most literal. I still got sacrificed. That's maybe like the most literal interpretation.
Yeah, I really do like ambient music that like occasionally punctuates the soundscape with something interesting, to like as a contrast and also to like, bring it to your attention, like a lot of ambient music, you just put it on, you forget about it. But like having things like the glitchiness or the guitar come in to be like, hey, guess what? Pay attention to me now. I'll lull you back. And then, the sort of like bringing to my attention and letting it fade back is a really interesting rhythm overall to the album. And this album does it quite well. This sort of like mastering of the attention of the listener, like, oh yeah, no, this is just a little soundscape. Oh, we got something going on here. And no, we're done with that now. It's just going to be really cool and very, very, very nice vibes. Oh no, here's some glitchiness. Yeah. So yeah, it's quite interesting to listen to. Yeah, I want to listen to the other albums from this artist now too. The Lighting 1 and 2 Candles.
Yeah. And then I'm looking forward to the 4th one. So I did go back and check out the first 2 and they're different enough, but still along the same idea. So I think this sort of beats focused dark ambient is the whole point of this label. It's what Brick's trying to do. So he does run this label. I should clarify. I was a little vague talking about it earlier, but this is a label that he's running.
I see.
Again, not sure if he's also the artist on these first releases or if somebody else is. Probably chime in and correct us. But yeah, it's supposed to be kind of this new take on dark ambient.
Great.
So yeah, I'm super excited to see what they do. I think also they said they're going to be releasing some skeleton lipstick, which is exciting because like I really liked his track on the Hot Takes compilation, which was very different than anything I'd expect to hear on this label, of course, That'll be interesting. And yeah, just it's exciting to see people trying out whole new genres.
Yeah.
Just trying to get everything going. So launched the label at the beginning of the summer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really cool. Really excited to see what they do with it. And I think you should check it out.
Sample from track 1, Titanic Shepherd of Gondwana from Echoes of Extinction, Dino Synth Anthology 1 by Unreal Estate Records. So this is a compilation album, an anthology album, and the artist who created Titanic Shepherd is Thagomizer. But every track on here, there's a lot of different artists. So welcome to Dino Synth.
Hell yeah.
If you didn't know what Dino Synth was, once you listen to that first sample, you'll know, oh yeah, that's definitely Dino Synth. What else could it be? So a while ago, I found this YouTube video called 50 Dungeon Synth Subgenres, and it's like got a little sample, like 30 seconds from 50 different albums, and there's so many different. And Dino Synth was one. I was like, okay, I got to check this out. And it turns out there's a lot of Dino Synth. People fucking love making albums about dinosaurs with synthesizers.
Dinosaurs are very popular.
They're very cool. So Unreal Estate Records is a German DIY tape label. And they do a lot of dino synth, not just that, but like they've been lately rolling deep in the dino synth territory.
Okay.
Yeah, because they've been doing a lot. If you look at their thing, they a lot of the artists on here on this anthology are ones that are also featured on their record label. So like I found out about them from another album called Omegalodon by Triptothebacus, which is a Megalodon-themed Dinosynth album, i.e. giant, prehistoric shark, which it's a good album, but it's very dark ambient kind of Dinosynth. Every single track on that album is named after a layer of zone of the ocean. So the Twilight Zone, the Midnight Zone, the Abyssal Zone. But, I thought the Echoes of Extinction is a really good sampler of like the range of Dino Synth. So I had a lot of fun listening to this album. There's a lot of variety in it. And this is the perfect way to open a Dino Synth album was track 1. It is just like heavy throbbing bass synth, roaring sound effects, ponderous, weighty. It's, some horns, makes it more triumphant. Like, look at this fucking dinosaur, man. That's the thesis of this album is dinosaurs fucking rule. And I love the artist name too. Do you know what Thagomizers are?
No.
So
is it a dinosaur?
It's a part of the dinosaur. So
is it the little spiked pieces on their tail?
Yes. So the Far Side cartoon back in the 80s.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. So yeah, the Far Side cartoon back in the 1980s had a comic where there's a bunch of cavemen and they had a blackboard and like, we call this part of the dinosaur the Thagomizer, after the late Thag Jones. And, it's the spiky bit of the tail, sort of implying that he got Thagomized by this fucking dinosaur. And so, like, paleontologists are like, we don't have a name for that part of that dinosaur. Why don't we just call it a Thagomizer? And they're like, okay, yeah, sure. And so, this is exactly my wavelength. And it's very good. But, it's not, there's the variety of this stuff. So, yeah, before we get to specific tracks, like what did you think, Mark?
Oh yeah, I love this. I do think the Dungeon Synth Dino Synth slip up is completely justified. Like you said, it came up on a set of subgenres, but it is also exactly what we were looking for, is that we've talked a lot about dungeon synth that's not just D&D or not just like generic high fantasy, which it perfectly works. I think dinosaurs also lend themselves really well to this because there's in our brains so cinematic, I guess. Like, that's one thing I was thinking about with this album is that for me, a lot of the first impressions on hearing tracks were like, oh, this would be a ripping theme. This would be a awesome, like, very thinking of in terms of like cinematic and soundtracks, and a lot of growl folding, a lot of dinosaurs growling all over the album.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Really some I think sampled from like Jurassic Park. There's on one track, there's like a weird call that I think the raptor does.
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah.
And I think that gets used a bunch when it's like summoning the other ones when they're hunting him through the compound at the end.
Yeah.
But like, it made me think of like, dinosaurs are such like a fantasy simulation because obviously we never overlapped with them, and like you largely experience them through movies.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh man, do we conceive of dinosaurs outside their cinematic splendor, or is that just a me problem? I don't know.
I mean, or movies, TV, like, the Flintstones and cartoons and comics. There's a hypothesis or a thesis out there about like how synthesizers are the instrument of fantasy, right? Like dungeon synth and all these subgenres of dungeon synth are all, there's not synthesizers pretending to be, quote unquote real instruments, right? They want to sound as electronic and as synthesized as possible. Like, cause these all the tracks of these albums sound, like modular, like analog synth, like very old school kind of synth work. Not like I'm trying to emulate the sound of a real violin or piano or whatever. And I think that's a deliberate choice because it's, there's a thematic linking between synthesizers and fantasy in general. So that's something that,
absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, like one thing that did surprise me, I didn't notice any obvious use of the Jurassic Park theme in the music.
No. Thankfully, none of that.
Yeah.
I think the only Jurassic Park sample I noticed was and it may not even be, I'd have to listen again to see if it's closer, is that at the end of track 8 kind of goes out on this odd dinosaur call. It's not like your standard like roar or growl. Yeah. I think that's from the first one. But
yeah, and that's the raptor themed. Track 8 is Raptors in the Long Grass, which makes sense that they use raptor sound effects for that.
Yeah.
So yeah. And there's a lot of variety in this too, like track 2, Primal Beast by Primal Beast.
Yeah.
We get guitar, electric guitar. There's a vocal chorus. This is like a hype track for a dinosaur. This is like the dinosaur walking and about to fuck some shit up. Like, it's great drum beat. Like, it's a hype track. I love it.
Yeah.
But like, it also gets sort of, there are elements that are more ambient. Like I mentioned, track 4, The Tyrant Queen Approaches by Edwin Brown. And why don't we fact play this? And that track gets, starts out with this sort of ambient kind of with field recording, it sounds like you're out in nature, and then builds up in tension. It gets really funky though about when we play the sample. But, they have another track, Some Have Never Left the Water, from Tryptothecus. Again, I need to look up these very paleontological terms before I go on the show. But yeah, that's obviously
that's too professional for us. You just fumble through it like a real amateur. Like,
that's true. So there's, overall, there's, some common themes in the tracks of being, weighty and very bass heavy, but like there's ambient, there's more energetic guitar stuff, there's some cool arpeggios in a lot of these tracks. But, that you listen to, that's some dinosaur music, man. Like that, I don't know what to tell you. That's dinosaur.
That's interesting. Is that like it's immediately dinosaurish. you said about track 1, of course. I loved track 2. I want to reiterate how awesome. Like track 2 is like a baller. I thought of it like an Italian, like 80s dino, like a dinosaur Carnosaurus type movie, a soundtrack. But then, yeah, I think for me, the tracks that really stood out were the more meditative and like underwatery tracks. So you talked about track 5, which is like ocean themed, of course, because you have to have an underwater themed track.
Yes.
We've always said as a rule. And I remember there being a lot of like bubbling and like an underwater sensation, but maybe less obvious in the last track 11. I also have that in my notes that I think
embraced by the primordial mires. So that's dinosaurs sinking into the mires to be preserved for paleontology,
to become oil for no reason and never interact with humans again.
It's also like the dinosaurs staring up at the stars. It's more cosmic and meditative too, you know.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, there's the 3 moods of a dinosaur, you know. Like,
that's right.
I fucking rule. I'm big, and I'm looking at the stars as I lay dying or waiting for the meteors to hit. You know, that's the Another one that really stood out to me is I really liked track 9, I think, which is like a synthwave take on it. Yeah.
It's a little synthier.
Yeah.
It still has all the dino growls. It still has like kind of like weighty bass in it, which, you know, is kind of a common theme across all these, but it was a very different take. It was a nice break from kind of all the dark ambient, more suspenseful synth work.
Yeah. Chill wave, synthwave, but yeah, I think it's called traveling the hadrosaur herd. So yeah, you're traveling with the herd, everything's fine. The sun's setting. It looks cool, man. Yeah. I can almost picture the pixel artwork of all the dinosaurs, you know, running across the cliff as we see the sunset, you know. That's kind of vibe I get from that. But yeah, I should mention at like track 8, I was really the Raptors on Grass is like, is that an oboe? If so, good job working an oboe in and making it work.
Yeah, I get a lot of oboes, I suppose.
Yeah, it's just a nice surprise. You don't expect it. Yeah, obviously it could fail, but in this case it worked really well. So yeah, if dinosaur synth is like something you're curious about, this is the perfect starting point. If you want to get it more into it, Unreal Estate has a bunch of albums, but there's also a lot of other dino synth artists in general. I know HDK has done some dino synth stuff. I'm sure it's a pretty common theme. It once you think about it, it does make sense for, you know, the ideas and the sound of it. It seems pretty obvious for a dungeon synth artist to branch out into dino synth. But yeah, it's just really fun. Yeah, dinosaurs rule. Like, what else can you say?
What else can you say? They do rule.
Yeah.
And again, it's so great to have just alternate takes on dungeon synth broadly.
Yeah.
Dinosaurs are great. Yeah, maybe that whole like prehistoric era is unexplored because it was an April Fool's album, of course, but on our last episode, we had the Mesolithic sound system. Is like our dungeon synth dance party music.
Oh yeah.
So explore the early era of creation. What if the obelisk taught the cavemen to make sick beats?
Oh shit.
About dinosaurs.
Damn. 2001 wave.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, why not?
Why not?
Point?
Why not?
Why not? Why not? Thank you so much for listening. Next episode, we're going to be coming back with some proper summer jams to close out summer. We're going to do best of 2023 Future Funk. As is tradition here, we're going to be extremely timely and do the best of last year halfway through the current year. So we're going to pick some albums from either, there's an infographic from r/Future Funk, which is, yeah, Reddit's always a questionable source of of information about these niche genres because they sort of end up being their own little weird niche sub-communities. We're going to go through that. And then, you know, shout out to Pacific Plaza Records. They also did a recent stream of, I guess, like 3 or 4 weeks ago at this point, of some of their favorite Future Funk from 2023. So I think we're going to crawl through those and just use it as an opportunity to really explore that genre, because there are artists in that genre, and just in general, that genre is one that I've wanted to explore because I've really been enjoying it more and more. Each time I give it another shot, I don't bounce off it the same way I used to. So I want to kind of keep that momentum going, keep exploring it while I'm into it.
Yeah.
So we'll pick a couple albums, maybe even more than 2. It might be, one of our big old sampler episodes. I don't know. Don't plan anything here. We just show up and start talking.
What are we, professionals?
I'm not. But hey, if you like our amateurish rambling and you want to hear more of it, we have a Patreon with 40 some bonus episodes compiled over the last couple of years at Nightclerk Radio at patreon.com. You can also, of course, find us at pretty much any social media site that matters: Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, etc., nightclerkradio.com. at nightclerkradio@gmail.com, whatever you do. As we always say, wherever you do choose to check us out, if you take a moment to like whatever little algorithmic signifier that site provides, really does help. And of course, go out there and build community. Find your herd of fellow hadrosaurs and check out some awesome music as you scurry across the plains. So thank you so much again for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.